And then I would simultaneously advise them to start organizing so that their point of view, with a very clear critique of the way in which the corporations have behaved and the government has behaved, gets through on a national level. And I would offer my services and the services of other spiritual teachers to help them craft this message so that it gets really clear to the heart of the problem, which is that they have been deprived of their livelihood because a group of very greedy people in league with the government of the United States at many levels has for years been raping the environment without any consequences. Now a major mistake has been made, and it has to be seen as a call to the radical, and I mean radical, regulation of corporations.
Right.
And this is what I would say to them. I mean, it might freak them out, but that's what I would say because that's what I believe.
Right. Right. Well, I think that that would be a pretty good mid to long range goal down in that region. And I would say that for me and a lot of the people that are in my circle, and just from my wanderings, my nomadic wanderings around the internet, what this event is doing is it is waking people up at a wholesale level. I've never seen so many people come alive from so many different backgrounds and political viewpoints. Is this something that you're experiencing as well?
I am, and I'm also experiencing the opposite. I'm also experiencing in America already going to sleep about it. I think both are happening, and I think that this is what our time is like. There are people who just simply don't want to see, and they're going to take very deep difficulties to wake up, which will probably have to be financial, I think. I think a great many Americans still believe in big oil. I think a great many Americans, even after this, believe that we should lift the ban on offshore drilling, which seems to me a proof of insanity. I think people should be locked up into lunatic asylums for thinking that that could be true, but it is true. And I think that the capping of the well by BP was greeted with such relief because it was almost a sign that we could stop thinking about it, whereas in fact the evolutionary damage is going to go on for hundreds of, perhaps even thousands of years, and that we've created a nightmare.
And for people in the know, that cap is just a Band-Aid, and there's a big gash about 13 miles south of that is still bleeding profusely. This is what Matt Simmons shared the other day, and one of my contacts down in the Gulf shared with me earlier on Friday, that there is yet another well. It's the main well that apparently blew on the 13th of February, and the 420 well was the relief well that blew. So what we're seeing is a mediated, literally, event with the secondary well and a completely other crisis and disaster that most people's attention is being diverted from.
Well, right. You see, this is what I think we're really up against. I think Obama's made some kind of wild mistake because he's legally made it impossible to report on the Gulf area, the area that's directly affected, because it's a felony to go in there in any way.
That's right.
So that really raises suspicions about, is there a massive cover-up about the authentic damage being done, and who's really responsible for it? Because if eventually the ties between BP and other big oil companies and government lobbyists and government policy become clear, then we'll really know that what we all know already, which is that this democracy is the best democracy money can buy. And at that moment, I think a lot of illusions about America will fall for Americans.
Yeah, absolutely.
So naturally, they're going to stop that getting out. So we're going to have a kind of tug of war between people waking up and wanting to find out more what's really going on, and between them and people who think it's all been solved, they're safe, we're perfectly okay, technology can solve everything, it doesn't matter that it's going to be 1,000 years of environmental desolation in that place, or hundreds of thousands of animals have died. Nothing.
So when I think of this, Andrew, I think of...
And I'm not being cynical, I truly am not, because I'm truly heartened by the awakening, but I think we always have to see the other side and keep
I think it's important. I think it's vital, and I agree with you. And a lot of people, in quote-unquote the New Age community or the light worker community have been holding on to this, shining image that everything is going to be okay.
Well, that's absolute rubbish, and they are just indulging in fake mysticism. It's all rubbish. That's a garbage mysticism, and it's been sold in the garbage New Age, and it's a total tragedy because very decent people who don't know anything about the authentic mystical traditions buy this garbage thinking they're going to be educated by it. Of course, this is nonsense. I mean, how does we expect to make an evolutionary leap simply by oming and schmoeming? We've got to change deeply. Human nature has to be transformed to receive these new energies, and that transformation is a difficult, rigorous one that the mystical traditions know a lot about and has nothing whatever to do with wanting to use occult power to manifest Mercedes and McMansions. It has nothing to do with cultivating prosperity for yourself alone. It has nothing to do with a simplistic vision of the light as being the only reality, when it's quite clear that when the light manifests as reality, it manifests in a dance of opposites, which includes the dark and everything we call evil and everything we call terrifying and menacing and destructive. And we've got to get real that all those things are all God.
Yeah, I agree. That's incredibly well said. And I could not agree more. And I think we're starting to see some perspective shift in that area with some folks that have been taking the light vitamins, and that's
well. And actually, I don't think so. I think we have again a two different strands of teaching about the future going on simultaneously. One that I consider a totally false and misleading one, in which this shift is certain. All we have to do is vibrate. We can keep the corporations. We can keep our way of life. We just have to send out love and light. This is nonsense. This is denial. This is bad mysticism. It has nothing to do with the rigors and demands of the birth that's being asked of us. And it is actually drugging and paralyzing people and keeping them immensely banal and stupid and heartless in the face of a shattering human condition.
Yeah, I agree. And childlike as well.
Worse than childlike. Childlike would be, as Jesus said, an initiatory state. This is childish, entitled, spoiled, narcissistic. It's an entirely narcissistic vision of God. God's just there to do exactly what you want, and you being wonderfully attuned can get God to do exactly what you want. This is an obscene version of God, as if God was a power we could play with, when God is actually a force we have to submit to and surrender to be able to be transformed by it, because it will not enter places where the ego is making dirty bargains for itself. My God, what a vision of the divine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely. It's
horrific, and it's banal, and it's boring, and it's paralyzing, and that part of the New Age has been a complete disaster. It is stupefied even further an already stupefied populace.
Well, yes, I totally agree, and I think that there has to be some accountability for quote unquote New Age teachers and New Age leaders.
Oh my God, I think there should be I would put in a kind of radiant inquisition of people with half a brain who would say this is bullshit unless you have a daily account of what new bullshit had been published. I mean, somebody on a call the other day, and I won't name her, said, and she's a pretty well-known teacher, that if we all prayed, our good intentions could clear the gulf of all environmental damage in 6 years. And everybody cheered and said, how wonderful, but this is absolute madness. Do we really think that we're going to get off so lightly from the contamination and pollution and devastation of the earth? Who do we think we are playing with? Do we think we have total control on this earth and can now use intentional prayer to just clean up our caca? Or do we really start to realize that we're in the hands of a divine that deeply loves us, but is also having to heal us because we're desperate addicts of power and domination by a desperately difficult bottoming out, which through miraculous grace is also going to be a birth? Let's get real about what's really going on and stop this infantile version of it.
Yeah.
And that was where the other strand of teachers come in, which I hope I'm one. I pray to God I am one, because if I'm not, I'd better shoot myself. It's an evolutionary mystical stream, which is saying there is a birth. Its terms are amazing and rigorous, and we need to address those terms and get serious about the kinds of disciplines that will really help us get humble and wiry and focused and passionate and joyful enough to do the work in and under the divine and surrender to the divine.
Yeah.
And that if we can do this, which is very difficult, or better still, if we can let this be done in us, which is even more difficult, then something miraculous is possible, which is that this great death that's happening will turn out to be the birth of an unimaginable beauty and splendor and humble empowerment, which will change the whole experience of human life by divinizing every aspect of it. And that is the other strand of teaching that's happening too, and that is the only game in town, because that's really what is needed, is a very clear vision of this evolution coupled with a really clear statement that I've tried to give in my book, The Hope, that the new enlightenment is love in action, not separating spirituality from politics, not separating mysticism from potentially walking peacefully and non-violently on Washington, not separating the deepest inner experience of divine love from acts of compassion and justice and standing up for the voiceless and witnessing the agony of the animals and really, really trying with great love but great firmness to wake up the world to where it is and what needs to happen to avoid really radical destruction and annihilation.
It seems to me that the one of the saving graces for us around this is creativity, and I'd love for you to speak to that, and as kind of a third stream option versus the reaction sort of Hegelian dialectic that most people get caught up in.
Oh, I think that true creativity comes from the soul, doesn't it?
Yeah.
True creativity is born out of deeper and deeper realization of the essence of reality and deeper empowerment by the energies of reality. And when realizations come together, realizations of essence and energy, then a being is born who can be a sacred instrument. And that is the kind of creativity we really should be after in every domain. What would sacred mystical scientists discover? What would sacred mystical doctors discover about the marriage between conventional forms of healing and radical shamanic forms of healing? What would they discover? It would be amazing. What would conventional artists and musicians discover if they surrendered their minds and hearts and bodies to this ecstatic experience of embodiment? What would they be able to create? What would architects create? What would politicians suddenly find themselves wanting to do despite their narrow, shrewd instincts? What would happen to the hearts of corporation leaders? They suddenly discovered that sitting on billions and billions of dollars of profits while 2 billion people live on less than $1 a day is not only obscene, but not a lot of fun in the end, because you could do something amazing with that money. Anything can happen when you discover the potential of your divine consciousness and the potential of the divine energy that's been graced to you from the divine mother that is the divine energy. So it's a very beautiful, very demanding path, but it's possible, it's real, it's here.
Could you speak to the dividing line between anger and passion, and how one can transform lucid anger into passionate energy to act?
I think it's the most important question, because I think without passion, real passion, you can never be in connection with the love force of the divine feminine, because that love force is a very passionate force. It's a passion of compassion, and it can also become a passion of divine outrage, because there is an aspect of the divine that is outrage, that is absolute purity, howling when violated by cruelty, when the creation is violated by terrible cruelty. And that is a very important source of sacred energy if it can be purified. So the most difficult thing for those who awaken their passion and their anger is to realize that passion is usually always awoken with a shadow and has to be purified by increasing giving of itself to the divine in adoration to be transmuted into divine passion.